Okay, so I made a video called The Absolute Basics of Driving in Wreckfest. You've probably seen it, quite a few people on my channel have seen it, and it suffers from one problem. I tried to watch it back and, well, it's kind of impossible to watch, mainly just because it's so long and there's so much information condensed into so little time, even though the video is nearly 44 minutes long. So, I'm making this video, a condensed version of the absolute basics of Wreckfest, all in, let's say 10 minutes, and I've already spent nearly a minute explaining all of this. Good, I'm so slow. Right, let's get started. This video is in 3 parts, organised by importance. Most important bits first and least important bits last, or at least in my mind. You can click to whichever one you want to watch, or just watch the whole thing, it's only 10 minutes. So, let's start with driving. If you can't keep up with players, how can you overtake or wreck them? Well, without getting lapped, you can't, and if you're getting lapped, chances are they're going to be holding a decent bit more pace than you. So, being able to drive fast is the most critical part of becoming good at Wreckfest. It's almost like it's a driving game. Funny that. Before we get started, my videos are almost entirely viewer suggested, so if you've got any ideas for a video and I've not done it yet, well, let me know in the comments, and chances are I'll do it if I remember to ever upload something. Right, driving fast comprises of 4 things: acceleration, braking, line choice, and who's around you. We don't have to drive fast compared to me, Ads Robin, Icy Dust, etc. We just have to drive fast compared to who's behind and in front of us, and we can change our line choice to suit this. Let me show you what I mean. The player in front of me is currently way too far ahead for me to interact with, but we can see him taking very wide lines. This tells me he's fairly slow in corners, and with a little bit of knowledge about the cars in game, I know that I'll out-accelerate the Gremlin too. So what's the solution to catching this player? Well, we're going to capitalise on his mistakes. We'll use all the track available to us while exiting a corner to get as much momentum as possible, and we're going to go far tighter into corners than he is. This lets me go through turns a lot faster, and I should try to time my overtake with a corner where he's going to go wide on. This will give him less opportunity to defend. Fortunately, he gets the inside line through the corner I planned on catching up to him on. You might have heard him brake for a second just as I got onto his rear right corner. If I were him here, I would let me pass and then brake late into my front, which would ruin my line and bleed a lot of momentum, giving me one chance to escape. If that fails, I'll return with a vengeance because I'm clearly going faster. Instead, he stuck side by side with me and tried to force me into the wall so that he could get ahead. I used my heavier weight to push him over to the other side of the track, forcing him to either brake or crash, and he picked to brake. Making sure that you don't go wide in corners by accident is the best way to stop someone catching up to you. You'll go wide in corners for mainly 2 reasons. Too much speed into the corner and too little grip through the corner. The former will cause the latter. More speed always results in less grip and a larger turning circle. A lot of cars in Wreckfest prefer straight lines over cornering hard. There are obviously exceptions, but that's the general rule. So we should make our turns as shallow as possible, while remaining on the track of course. And if there's nobody immediately around you, focus on going as fast as possible as you hit the apex of the corner. The apex is the midpoint in the turn where you will be going as tight as possible to the corner, giving you more speed when you exit the turn. When a player is capable of matching your speed, as we see here, we have 3 options. Simply going faster by taking ever so slightly tighter lines and generally using the track more efficiently. This is difficult in this situation because we're already doing that, as you see. Secondly, we can take deliberately bad lines to enter his field of view, hopefully making him think we're closer than we actually are and making him take more defensive lines that aren't quite as fast. We can capitalise on that. This won't be as effective if there is more than one player though, and it is slower. And thirdly, of course, we can just crash them out. Well, option 3 is out the window. I'm in Black Flag 2 here, so I can't intentionally crash out other players. Instead, we're going to try option 2. This is essentially a bluff, but if it works, it'll give us one chance to catch up. These lines are slower though, and anyone who notices this will ignore you and race away very quickly, and you will not be able to keep up with them. The next best thing is identifying where the player ahead of you is faster, either better on straights or in corners. If it's both, you're just going to struggle to keep up with them, so try to affect their lines. If you're close enough, cutting inside of them to make them go around you can work, or ramming them as they brake, making their lines harder or impossible, will work as well. If you're faster in corners, like I am here, we need to get as close as possible through the turns. Eventually this will happen, we will catch up, and being faster in the corners, this will let us choose which side of the player we want to be on, letting us make his lines worse so that we can be faster for a little bit on the straights as we exit the turn. Some cars will keep up regardless, and there it's critical to maintain side by side. Don't let them squeeze out in front of you if you can avoid it, and if they do, and it's allowed, this will open a good chance to spin the player, but it's fairly easy to counteract. If we're faster in the straights, it's important to accept that you're slower in corners. Don't try to match them. Instead, use your superior speed to get in front and keep yourself there, and force yourself onto the inside of the corner as much as possible, making the player who's better at cornering stay on the outside. They're faster in corners, so you're almost always going to go wider through the turns if you try to match them. This way we can lean on them when we do try to match their cornering speeds, if they try to pass. Okay, so now we know a little on line choice, I'm going to quickly discuss tuning. I have a separate video on this, but in short, lock your diff and set your brakes to being equal or rearward biased. Front biased brakes cause understeer under braking while cornering and deceleration oversteer if you're not careful. The brakes act kind of like a pivot when biased forwards, and this will allow you to slow down ever so slightly faster if you brake while not turning at all, and more or less everywhere else they're just going to be worse. Middle biased brakes give you the best stopping efficiency, and rearward biased brakes give you better cornering under braking. You generally should avoid cornering while braking, but sometimes you need to, and rearward biased brakes can help there. Suspension should be as stiff as you can manage. If you don't want to change it every time that you get a track that prefers soft or hard suspension, then I would set it to about 4. This way you have some suspension travel, but not so much it slows you down on the flatter tracks, and you don't have so little suspension that on the bumpier tracks you'll just be getting bounced everywhere. Different cars require different tunings, of course. For gearing, it should be as set as fast as you can drive the car. Boulder Bank Short is the fastest track in the game. For C-Class you want about 5.6 top speed, this is roughly 100 to 120 miles an hour. For B-Class, 6 to 7 for your top speed, and for A-Class it's almost always best just to set your gearing as long as it can go and use the extra power that you have from being in A-Class. Set your difficulty settings to half off half as you see here. I have a video on all of the difficulty settings and also clutch manual on why it's so much better, which you can watch here. In short, it's just well worth learning. Set your clutch dead zone as low as possible without the clutch engaging when you go to test it, and saturation to 5%. This means that when you hit the clutch bound to analog, it will always be either 0% or 100% whenever you make an input. This makes the gear shifting almost like sequential gears, which, as we know, are a lot faster because they're quicker engagement. Let's discuss attacking and defending players for the last part. Fights involving lots of players are best fought from behind, where we can pick and choose what we want to do. It's fairly easy to keep up with players who are fighting, which is why you want to keep fights between yourself and others as short as possible. Even if it is more fun to spend a whole race side by side with someone, it is almost always a lot slower. So by staying at the back of a fight, we leave a lot more options open to us, to either pass quickly, or if one of the two players goes to make a move, perhaps you can help them into that move with a gentle ramming, causing them to crash or be significantly slower and get ahead. But the most critical part of all when it comes to fighting players is to keep your fights as short as you can, and always try to be the one instigating the fight. Defending is always reactionary. It involves a lot more thought and calculation than attacking. When one-on-one, like here, things like covering corners, braking late, tail slapping, bumping into turns, forcing through and making people mess their lines up are very common. This fight is an excellent example of two players going as fast as possible and fighting for first place simultaneously. I simply don't have time in this video to explain every move we did against each other and how it affected the race, but safe to say every single turn was some kind of defensive or offensive move that race. As a general rule for defending, you want to watch the player's lines and move in such a way that as they exit the turns you'll be directly in front of them. This way they push you out of the turn, which is a fairly safe way of defending. It's also worth noting that it's a lot easier to defend and overtake with a player in your field of view, so you want to fight for the inside line as much as you can. Undertaking is the most common form of overtaking a fight, because there's so little that can actually be done about it. With that being said, thank you for watching. Unfortunately, we're out of time.